Hello and welcome to Witchy Wellness Radio. I'm your host, Lauren Chalantani, women's holistic health coach and fellow recovering perfectionist. This podcast was created to show you that your body is not in the way, it is actually leading your way. Hello everybody, welcome back to Witchy Wellness. Again, this is your host Lauren and you are listening to episode 156, Human Design with Victoria Jane. While I was manifesting and living my dream life, I know that it includes mind, body, and soul health, which means ditching the toxic people, the toxic work environment, and the products that are wreaking havoc on you and your goals. One simple change I did years ago was to switch my cleaning and laundry skincare routine from some crap to something more powerful, potent, and pure. So if you are interested in learning more about that and how essential oils can help you ditch all the toxic crap, mind, body, and soul, and yes, it does help promote better feeling emotions and lessen that anxiety, join me and my team every Monday on Zoom at either 2 p.m. or 8 p.m. Easterns for our Intro to Essential Oils class. A different teacher will be guiding you each week, and it's great for beginners or even a good refresh on the top 10 essential oils that you can use to revamp and cleanse your life. RSVP in the show notes and that link to save your spot. And make sure you say Lauren Chalantani sent you. While spots are limited, make sure to book and reserve your spot today. And without further ado, please enjoy episode 156, Human Design with Victoria Jane. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Witchy Wellness Radio. Again, I am your host, Lauren, and this is a show you learn how your emotions and your body is not in the way, but they're actually leading the way. And today we have the amazing Victoria Jane here to talk all about human design. She is a human design coach whose mission is to guide growth-oriented humans to live with less hustle and more flow. After a decade in Silicon Valley, achieving everything she thought she was supposed to, Victoria was earthquaked into the harsh reality. She was in burnout and in danger of doing irreparable damage to her health. As she searched for how to heal not only her body, but her spirit, she discovered her design. Today, she's passionate about sharing human design so you can confidently live your truth. Oh my goodness. Welcome to the show, Victoria. I'm so excited to dive into this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here and to chat. I love human design, so it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, and I told you off air, I was so surprised. We've been on air for almost 4 years. I'm like, how have we not had somebody on for human design yet? But I guess we were waiting for you. So it's all divine timing. So thank you for being our intro here on Witchy Wellness Radio to human design. But we always start every show, and I'd love to hear that transition of that Silicon Valley era mindset and who you were then and how you transformed into running this beautiful business that helps other people find their own power.
Yeah, it's I really am enjoying being asked this question, and also want to acknowledge that it's still like in transition, right? So I know I'm the first guest to talk about human design on your podcast, but I'm guessing that many people have already heard the term and maybe know a little bit about their design. And, because I see the world through the language of human design now, because it's been so transformative, I feel like I want to mention that I'm a 6-2 profile. And so the first part of my life living in this kind of trial and error, like I got to test things out. Do I really want to do this? Maybe not. Maybe I want to do something else. And that phase like included my time in tech and in Silicon Valley. And I look back now, and it wasn't that long ago that I left. I mean, I officially left January of 2020. So it wasn't that long ago, but I look back and I'm like, I feel like a totally different person, like trying to relate or like put myself back in that former mindset. Like, I mean, I remember it, of course, like I was there for my life, but it's almost hard to put, I mean, it is hard to put into words just how much has fallen off in terms of like my programming, my patterns and my conditioning. And of course, there's still like so much there, right? Like just yesterday, I was like, oh, wow, I'm still really controlling about this thing. But it's been a wild journey. So I don't know if I directly answered your question, but that's how it feels right now. And to go back to the 6th line piece, so to explain a bit more, like we all have these numbers in our design that are different archetypes we embody. And as a 6th line, the first part of our life, we're experimenting. And then we get to what's called climb up on the roof and like get a reprieve. And I'm very much like I fully have arrived on the roof and I'm really enjoying that. And it's like a totally different version of me. So.
Awesome. Yeah, that's totally what I was asking. Because I love hearing, it's never an end point. We're never like completely actualized or enlightened or healed. There's always a layer that we're peeling back or rediscovering or learning. So I love that you said that because it's a process. It's a process to let everything come to the surface, love it, and grow from it. But I would love, since I know people probably have heard of human design. I've heard of human design. I'm always interested in it. But could you give us like a brief rundown, like what it is? And I know we pulled up my chart here and I'm like selfishly like, oh, I want to learn what all these things are so I can read my chart. Could you give us a little intro to kind of what human design is and go from there?
Yeah. So I think of human design as a system that describes how our unique energy works. And that can be at a very high level, like type, there's 5 different types in human design, but it goes all the way down to individual specific gifts that we have. And so there's something like 2 billion different combinations of designs. So like when I say it describes how our energy works, I mean it in a very general way and a very specific way. And once we know that, human design gives guidance on how to navigate our lives with more ease, less resistance and pushing. And that's what got me so on board initially too, because I was burnt out and pushing so hard and it seemed like everybody else was doing great. And I was keeping up, right? But on the inside, I was like so exhausted. And at a more like descriptive level, human design uses, so it's kind of like what it gets you and why, in terms of like, okay, what does it actually look like? Or what are we talking about? We take your birth date, time information and location, and you'll get a chart. And there's like a picture of a little human with some shapes and lines and colors. So that's what you get. And it pulls from 4 different systems. So the chakra system, the I Ching, the Kabbalah, and astrology. And it like fuses it all together. So that's the other way of explaining what human design is. But I feel like I need to talk about both because sometimes if you only mention one or the other, it's like, what are we really talking about here?
Oh, yeah. And I love how it combines all those systems because I'm totally into a lot of those things. And what I love when I'm interested in learning something new is how to heal the trauma. Some people might say karma or the blocked chakras, people will say. How can we utilize this system just from the knowing of what our chart says to not only, you said, find our gifts, but also help clear and heal trauma?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's like layers to it, right? Because there's a lot of different places. I think that before even answering directly, I'll say that knowing your design can be a great roadmap to seeing what your gifts are, as well as where you might have picked up what human design calls conditioning, but really like where we might have habitual grooves and pain points or places that we might have tendencies to feel unworthy or small. So there's just that. Now, where can we find it? There's at the level of your type. So there's 5 different types, and each one has its own purpose. So you're a generator. You have this consistent life force energy. Also, like, and I'll jump around because I have your chart in front of me. So there's like all this detail. And before we hit record, we were talking about how there's like a few different people that have popped into my life, some of whom I've gotten quite close to, that have the same birthday as you. And so they have a lot of similarities. And so for you specifically, not all generators, but you in particular, have the capacity to really be in tune with your own authenticity and like what you love and what you love about life. And it's like not typically thought of as like a hard skill. So I don't know if you have articulated this to yourself, but I find people who have this vessel of love incarnation cross, it comes so naturally to you to like appreciate, oh my gosh, we're going down, like we're driving down the road and the fall colors are so beautiful. And can we just like appreciate it for a second? Or, if you reply to someone's text message, like I find in my experience, it's so easy for you to just share what's really on your heart and not, and in a way where other people might hold back. And you're just like, no, I just want to be real and like shine my light. And it feels so good to be around people like you. So, that's not all generators necessarily, but that also flavors this quality of life force energy that you share. And so you can see how much I like this, and I'll just go off and I'm like, wait, what was I talking about? So to go back to the trauma piece, you can look at purpose, and then you can look at also, well, where typically do generators get kind of held back, right? And if your strength is, oh my gosh, I'm naturally like exuding and radiating the love that I have for things. And if that's what I'm here to offer, but I've been told like I need to work really hard and slave away and like do things I don't want to, I mean, that's a form of trauma, right? You're essentially repressing who you really are. So there's that at the like type level. But then another way to look at it too is wherever you're colored in white in your chart is where you're open to taking in energy from the world around you. So most people have a combination of colored in centers and undefined centers, which are what the white centers are called. It's not, sometimes people think that it's like open and closed. That's not, it's like open / undefined or defined for the colored centers. I like to be precise about language. So in these centers where you're colored in, you're consistently sharing that energy. So for example, like with all the love that you have for life, like that's always there. That's always a part of who you are and and you also know that about yourself, right? Like, these things that I enjoy make me who I am. Now, where you're white, so for example, the way in which you express yourself, like your throat center is totally open, can change based on different situations. You might actually feel pressure to speak in certain situations if everybody else is like holding their voice back. You're so tuned into like what needs to be said, not just by people, but maybe in the environment, that sometimes open throats are like, I just blurted something out and I didn't even know I was going to say it. And I see you laughing. So it looks like that resonates. And sometimes, not always, right? It's not like this, that like you have this in your design and it means that it has to express in a certain way. But a lot of times when we're undefined, because we're more sensitive to the energy around us, this can also be where we pick up, not necessarily always a trauma, but like I need to show up this way, right? I'm stressing out about what I'm going to say because sometimes something just comes out of my mouth and it seems like everybody else is like so sure about what they're saying. So those are some examples.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm over here muted, but I'm laughing like, yep. That's me. That's me for sure.
Yeah. I mean, another really common one is in what's called the ego or the heart center. I mean, ego is not a bad thing in human design. It's actually not in kind of the general spiritual way that we think of like, oh, ego is bad and we need to get rid of it. If you have a defined ego in human design, it's actually great. And you are consistently meant to exert your willpower. However, for most of us, about 70% of the population, and you have an open ego, I do too. So we fall in that 70%. We don't have consistent access to willpower. Sometimes we might be like, yeah, totally, I'm going to do it. And other times it's like, right. And that's not a bad thing, although, societally it might seem in quotes bad, but there can often be a sense of, well, since I don't always have the will to back up what I want to do, am I ever going to be able to do what I want to? And there can be a sense of like, I have to prove myself, right? When that's actually not the case. And so, but there can be a lot of wounding there. So that's like another really common one for people with open egos, feeling like, oh, I have to prove myself. I have to show that I'm worthy some way, when actually our worth is not dependent on us committing to and following through on things. Our worth and our value is beyond that. So it's just a different journey depending on your design, what you're here to learn.
Ooh, I love it. I want to learn more. So how can we, I mean, obviously beautifully said with the gifts, but also uncovering that conditioning or the possible trauma through your chart. How can we use human design to help improve other areas of life like health, relationships, business, or just like you've alluded to it, but just like a blueprint for your life, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the short answer is like, it can help with all those things. with health, I think there's two kind of high level dimensions. One is your energy, right? So if you're a manifestor, projector, reflector, the thing that we all have in common is we actually don't have this life force energy that generators and manifesting generators do. But since most of the world, about 70%, again, is a generator and MG, a lot of us feel like, how come our energy isn't as consistent as everyone else's? Like, I remember being in like preschool and the teacher being like, hey, we're all working on this art project. Like, raise your hand if we should like keep working on this, or do we need to take a break? The teacher's like figuring out the timing of the day. And of course, because there's more sacral kids in the class, everyone's like, yeah, let's keep going. And in the back of my projector head, it's like, I'm tired. Like, can we actually take a break? So it's like little things like that, right? I mean, little to big, but that's a small example. So knowing what your energy type is and how your energy works, and how consistent or inconsistent you are, is huge. I work with so many people that I think also because of my own journey are attracted to me because of my own journey, are attracted to me because they're on their own kind of like a burnout. I've been trying to keep up things. So that's huge for health, obviously. And then the other piece is human design also gives some information for each of us about how we best take in food. So, are you meant to eat a certain kind of food? Are you meant to eat in certain conditions, whether that's with certain sounds or at certain times of day? Does your brain need food more regularly or not? Some people's hunger levels vary a lot more than others. So there's a lot all there. You are you're what's called a hot thirst person. So there's a few different dimensions to this. The first one is your brain is going all the time. It's probably like the simplest way to put it. And when you use your brain, you're also using calories, using fuel. And so eating relatively consistently and regularly is important. If you're like doing more, like in your business or whatever, you want to be eating more regularly, even though, and there's like, this is where it gets nuanced, or you can kind of layer together different pieces. As a generator, if you're doing something and you're having so much fun, that can give you energy. And so you might feel like, oh, I don't need to stop right now. Right. But then you'll just want to make sure to like fuel up later because you do need to replenish. The thirst part is staying hydrated is huge for you. You're the kind of body where you want you holding up your water. So the hot part is hot thirst people tend to run cooler. And so it's helpful to regulate your body temperature with warmer things. It doesn't mean you have to eat hot all the time, but it tends to be that hot thirst people will do better with warmer things rather than like cold all the time. But that might change if you're in a certain environment that's hotter or colder than what you're used to, right? But there's 6 different types, and they actually go by oldest to newest. So like the oldest type, what you eat really matters. And then as we evolve, so at a certain point, humans learn how to cook and refrigeration. And so your digestive type is kind of in that transition point when we're becoming a little more modernized, and you're like, cool, let's use temperature to regulate, right? And then you can go more modern, and there are some people that like sound and light and vibration really affects them. So yeah.
Oh, yes. I'm like so interested. That's so awesome. Yeah. If I don't drink a lot of liquids, and I always love drinking hot liquids too, like I'll just literally drink hot water. Hot lemon water is my favorite. My mind is blown, y'all. I'm like, yep, that's me. And I have to eat small meals a day. I've tried intermittent fasting, does not work for me. Like,
yeah, fasting's not great for an active brain because your brain's like, I actually can't think right now.
I just asked my partner, he'll tell you, yeah, she is not consistently eating.
Yeah.
The brain function goes down, hangry goes up. It's it's real. If you guys are hangry, you should get your human design charts read just to see.
Yeah, totally. Well, and so many people ask about this too, because there's so much food information out there. And at the end of the day, I think most people know this, especially if you've been in like wellness for a while. It's like, oh, duh, we're all different and different things work for different people. Right. So I actually just put up a video course on how to eat for your design. So if people don't want to do a full reading, maybe I can share a link and like a little discount gift code and people can check that out, because there's so many layers to it. And usually if people ask me in a reading, it's like I try to squeeze it in, but there's like a lot. And so I think it's like almost an hour and a half, this video that I made, but you can learn about all that because not everyone's going to be a hot thirst.
Oh yeah. Thank you for that. We'll link all that in the show notes because that's really interesting. Yeah, in health coaching school, that's what we learned. I went to IIN, Integrative Institute for Nutrition, and this takes it to a whole new level as well.
Some health coaches get really maybe triggered is a strong word, but challenged by some of this information. Because like one of the types is it's called indirect light. And these are people who do better eating more when the sun is down. Right. And that really like cool. Freaks some nutritionists' minds out because they're like, no, you got to like, don't eat too close to bed and blah, blah, blah. But there are some bodies that are more active after the sun goes down. These are like the most modern, this is like the newest digestive type. And so it's just different, I'll leave it there. But so there's some of these people, I have them as clients and they're like, if I have to eat like in the morning, I want to like not chew and like wear sunglasses. And they're like, I swear to God, it helps me digest better.
No, we do not feel challenged by this. Like I love anything, I'll say woo or energetics. Like that's, you're welcome here. Wishy Wellness welcomes all of that for sure. I wanted to ask, how can this help with relationships too? If you give some examples with that.
Yeah. I mean, it's huge, right? I think when we talk about relationships, whether that's a friendship, a business partnership, a romantic relationship, a lot of the conflicts I see between people, well, first of all, there's like the inner child, like wounding piece, right? Like you get in a conflict, and you're like, this isn't really what it's about. So there's like what we talked about before, like getting the map to our own wounds that can be helpful. But then there's this other piece of I'm this way, right? Like I am me and I see the world through my lens. And sometimes we're like, okay, I get, my partner, whoever's different, but couldn't they just change? Like, couldn't they see it my way? And when you start to understand other people's designs, I see over and over again, people developing more compassion, more understanding, more acceptance of the people in their lives, especially with some of the stickier, not even stickier, but like just like deeper relationships, like parents and siblings and that kind of thing. And you're like, oh my God, I've known them my whole life. Like they're always like this, but why are they always like this? And then you're like, oh, because, they're a manifester and like they're not like me or whatever it is. So that's the high level piece. And then I think once if you choose to go deeper in understanding somebody else's design, you also start to learn how can I support you better, right? Like as a generator, for example, as a generator, this is your chart, right? Okay. With an emotional authority, I know that you need time to actually kind of process what do you want to do? And it's not that you're indecisive. It's that how you feel about something is going to change over a certain period of time. So I can offer an option for you to react to. Like I can be like, hey, how do you feel about going out to this new place for dinner next week? And then I can say, you can feel into it. I'll check back in a couple of days, or like, let me know. Right. But I also know that like, I'm not going to say, do you want to go out to dinner next week? Or where do you want to go? Because that's probably not going to feel that good. You're like, oh gosh, I don't know. And then you have to think about it. And like, you don't want to think about it. You just want to be able to respond from your gut, and it's so much easier if I give you options.
Yeah, I think I'm going to make my partner listen to this episode. Literally, that happened Friday night. So,
oh, perfect. You know what's funny is I make up these examples and I talk to people, and so many times people are like, "Oh, that's literally what happened." I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah. It was actually almost a week ago, Wednesday night. It was like, well, where do you want to go to dinner? And all day, I just couldn't. I was frustrated. I couldn't think. I don't know. I was like, "Do you have any ideas of where you want to go?" Yep. Yep, because I couldn't feel into it.
That's the generator. I love that because then you turn it back on the other person. You're like, please give me options. And right, and my former partner is in MG, and he used to do this. It'd be like 2 p.m. and he'd be like, "What do you want for dinner?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm not hungry." Right. But I realized after I learned human design, like, oh, he actually needs help thinking about options so that he can respond from his gut. So it's just funny, those little tweaks.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Divine timing intervention here.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about human design and business because I can see the huge potential. I mean, with just life force energy and that kind of thing of like not to burn yourself out. Interesting to see what you say about my chart as well, because I think I'm prone to burnout, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just like working against myself.
I think, I think given this society we live in, we're all sort of prone to burnout in the sense that I think there's like always something more to do. And, okay, so prone to burnout. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like there's this collective belief that like we need to be working hard all the time. And of course, so for the generator specifically, how that gets set up is in an ideal state, what does it look like? You're led by your gut. You're doing only the things you have the authentic energy for, and everything else is a no. So burnout for the sacral, so if you're a generator and MG, it can get to the point where you actually don't have energy, but how it starts, and more often than not, most of the time, I have the quote energy to do something. Like I can make myself wake up and I can make myself do the things, but it's like, it feels like a drag. It's just this like, ugh, like I don't want to be doing this. This is so painful. And maybe it takes like 5 times longer, because I think of the sacral center, which is what makes you a generator and MG, as like this inner fire that you have, right? So when you're doing the things you enjoy, you're putting logs on the fire. When you make yourself do things you don't want to do, you don't have any logs on the fire. So you're just like trying to eke some heat out of this like dying fire, and that's like burnout for a sacral being, essentially. So there's that piece. But if you believe that you have to keep doing, that's where it happens. Am I answering the question?
Oh, for sure. And I would just giving myself as an example, but I guess understanding how your energy works and how you could lead to burnout for your different types is beneficial. Mm-hmm. But what are maybe some other ways in business you can utilize your human design to help you to grow?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds so simple. Like sometimes I feel like it all comes back to strategy and authority. And I'm sure people in the human design space have heard this over and over, but we can kind of take, okay, so as a generator, for example, right, your strategy is to respond to things. You're an emotional authority. So in business, it's like, oh, if you get an offer to collaborate with someone, don't feel like you have to respond immediately, right? And then you're paying attention to your gut underneath. And so it's like, it's like the same stuff, but you're applying it to different situations. So I don't know if there's any specific business like situations or challenges that have come up for you recently that would like as an example to talk through.
For me, I am thinking like I get podcast pitches and I do read them right away, and I will wait a few hours, if not the next day, to feel it out. And I'm like giggling to myself because I'll like read the pitch, I'll read the bio, I'll look at their Instagram and, all that kind of stuff. But I still wait and see how it feels. Mm-hmm. And every time I've ignored that and booked someone anyway, either they're a flake or I just feel like they don't vibe, it just doesn't feel right. So I'm affirming that that's definitely for me. I would say for me, I launched a new course this past year and Anxious to Align, which is amazing. I think the biggest thing for me is that consistency after that of launching and keeping it going has been the issue.
Okay. Yeah. This one has come up with some of my like business clients. So there is so this gets back to like, okay, you have sacral energy, you're going to be excited about some things and some things are a no, right? And this is really hard because in business, there's so many shoulds, just as there are in regular life, right? So sometimes, you might make something and then you run it once, you run it twice, and maybe you're not excited about it anymore. And that is so hard for the mind to be like, maybe I'm not supposed to do it anymore. But I would argue that making yourself doing that, that's the same thing we were just talking about of like, oh, you don't have the energy to do it, don't do it. it's much harder when you would apply it to a situation where you're like, oh, but this was my thing, right? Or like, but so and so said I need to like now can become a passive income stream and I need to, make it an evergreen offering. But it's like if the idea of turning it into an evergreen offering is making you want to cry, then maybe your energy isn't behind it. So there's a piece of human design. It's like the information's right there, right? And it sounds easy enough, but actually doing it, and this is like why we call living your human design an experiment, is oftentimes also really challenging. Because like for you to be like, okay, well, I made that and now it's done. I'm going to put it on the shelf. And it doesn't mean it's done forever, because maybe you'll have energy for it later. But in the present moment, or maybe, you're going through your emotional wave and you're not feeling it for 2 weeks. And then in week 3, you will. But for those 2 weeks, you're not feeling it. You let yourself say no. And that's the tricky part, because most of the time, many of us are like still beating up or, still guilting ourselves into like, oh, but maybe I should, or like, so yeah. How does that?
Oh yeah. The shoulds what kill us for sure. Yeah, totally. And that's kind of what I've been doing intuitively anyway. And just working more on podcasts on things that do light me up. Mm-hmm. So thank you for reaffirming, because I have a lot of other ideas that I'm excited about that I haven't created yet. And now I'm like, all right, this is my permission to give myself instead of pushing uphill.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so simple, yet quite radical, to give yourself complete freedom and permission to only do the things that are a yes, because it means also you're not doing things that maybe somebody told you was a good idea or that is safe, right? But if your biggest asset is this like profound energy, right? And how like on you can be when you feel it, then anything else that doesn't have it is like not satisfying, to go back to like a generator word, right? Like when you're doing the things you really enjoy, it's deeply satisfying, versus doing these things that are not. And it's like, oh, there's just that frustration, right? So that those can be good guideposts in your business as well, of like, okay, if I did this, would I be satisfied with the outcome? Or, I think we all know like subtly if something is we're pushing uphill, but making the change sometimes is scary.
Oh, for sure. And I know we've mentioned different energy types and strategies. Probably should have started off with this, but could we go over very briefly different energy types and strategies in human design, just for a brief overview? People aren't familiar
totally
with all these words we're throwing around.
I know human design is its own language. So okay, so we've talked about generators, and for manifesting generators, it's the same strategy because you both have a defined sacral. So it's to respond. Sometimes, depending on the version of the chart you run, it'll say wait to respond, which is important because it's like you're not chasing after things, right? It's just the way your energy works. You'll magnetize what's meant for you, and then you just get to like say yes or no. Manifestors, and generators and MGs make up about 70% of the population. Manifestors are less than 10. It's like 8 to 10%-ish, a little under. And their strategy is to initiate and inform. So there's 2 pieces to it. And their purpose is really to lead the way in something, to like be the initiating spark. So it's so important for them to really follow through on their conviction, to do what they feel like, I'm so compelled by this thing, I have to do it. And the informing is letting people know they're going to do it, because sometimes the manifestor has had experiences where they come across, quote, too strong, or they feel shut down. And so they're like, I'm just going to, there's a tendency to want to just go do their own thing, going back to like the trauma that maybe has happened. But what informing does, and it's so important, is it lets people around the manifestor who they want to like join in on that, right? That path that they're paving. It allows them to know what's happening. So that's for the manifestor. And then we have projectors, and they're about 20% of the population. And their main gift and purpose is to really be able to see into things deeply, whether that's, all projectors can see people and into situations quite well, but also sometimes there's like a system or a science or an art that they're like, oh, I just kind of get it in a different way. And for that reason, they're really here to guide, but in order for their guidance to really have an impact, their strategy is to wait for an invitation so that whoever they're offering this guidance to, it really lands. Because we can't just, I'm a projector. We can't just be like spewing our advice everywhere and expect that everybody actually wants it, right? And then the last type is reflectors. And these are the rarest type. They're about 1% of the population. Their design, their chart, all of the centers are white. And so they're able to really be these chameleons where like, they can be with one group of people and fit in, and then another group of people and like bring out this totally different part of themselves. And so their strategy is really wild and different. Before making any decision, I mean, you think as an emotional authority, you have to wait. Reflectors are here to wait a whole lunar cycle before they decide anything, because they're so ever changing that they can actually feel like different versions of themselves throughout this whole cycle. So they actually really need to take their time and just let themselves, be all these different versions of themselves before committing. Yeah.
That's so cool. I did not know that. Wow, less than 1%. Have you worked with?
Or about 1%.
Or well, yeah, wow, 1%. Yeah. Have you worked with any reflector? Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's funny because while they're 1% of the population, I see more than 1% of my practice be reflectors. I think because they're like, oh my God, human design explains my life, right? And they're all so different, as you can imagine, right? Because they often, I mean, as the name of their type implies, they're really reflecting what's going on around them. If you hang out with a reflector, often they'll reflect back your own qualities. Like you'll be like, oh my gosh, I love this reflector so much. She's so blah, blah, blah. And like, usually it's also things that you want to love about yourself too. What else can I say? I've also had a lot of reflectors, not a lot, but I've had a good amount of reflectors come through my human design certification program. And when I listen to the practice readings that they'll submit to me, the commonality is they're like the best hype person for the person they're reading for, and not in a cheesy way. Cause like, if you're like too much of a hype person, it can be like a little too much. Right. But it's a little hard to describe, but it's like every reflector reading I've listened to, somehow they can see the other person, like the person that they're reading for it, and like they feel into it, and they're just like saying like, this is how great you are. And it's like really special. Yeah.
I love that. That's so sweet. So you mentioned getting your chart read. You also you have certification if you want to become your own human design coach. I guess you'd be a coach, right?
Yeah. All these terms are used interchangeably, yes. Like reader. Sometimes I'll just say practitioner. I designed my program initially as a projector. There were people around me in my circle who were like, who were coaches specifically, who were like, can you teach me like some of these basics? And so that's how it started. And that's why the coaching piece is what I have focused on, because there's a lot of different places you can go to learn how to just read like the technical pieces and speak to the information. But what's so interesting to me, and we didn't talk about this, but when I was working in tech too, I managed teams. So what's always been really interesting to me as a projector, and then also in my incarnation class, is like seeing what people have, like what talents and potential people have around me. Like I really like to like groom and mentor and that kind of thing. And so with my program, the human design coaching certification, we get into like how to read a chart and all of that. But it's like the interesting part to me is like, okay, and then what do we do with it? How do we see those blocks that you might have, or those patterns that you want to heal and allow you to expand, right? So I don't even remember the question now, but yes.
I don't either, to be honest. I don't either. That's when it's a good podcast interview. Yeah. We're going with the flow. Awesome. Well, do you have anything else you wanted to talk about before we kind of start to close the show down today? Anything popping up for you?
Well, I'm curious what, because I know you knew a little bit about your design before we chatted. Mm-hmm. If there's anything around your experience of being an emotional authority, a generator, anything else I've said maybe right now where it's allowed you to see yourself in a different light.
I always knew like intuitively or emotionally, I have to like tune into that and have time to sit on it. But it took me a while. Growing up, I thought that wasn't necessarily looked down upon, but it wasn't encouraged, right? More logical, yes or no. A lot of people see the world black and white. And I feel like maybe I see it more gray in an emotional, intuitive sense. Like, I don't think there is a right and wrong. And so I think over time growing up, knowing that about myself, and especially reaffirming it through this, definitely it's kind of solidified everything. And we said off air, like, I'm interested to learn more, but like, would you say my heart, ego, and throat are all open? Or not open, what undefined is what? Yeah. I'm learning.
Yes. No, you got it right. They're open because they're white and there's no gates. So it's like you can feel the energy around you, and gates sometimes will filter how you feel it, but you have no gates. So it's like you're a blank canvas in how you receive and feel that energy.
And I think the more that I step into my authentic self, like what we just talked about for me personally, I've always wanted to have a really pretty voice, like singing voice. And like I grew up, my best friend she could have been a professional singer. And I just would never be able to speak my voice because I was always afraid, like singing, everybody else around me so good. And as I step more into my power and honing in on things we just talked about today, especially when I'm at home or even around my partner, people that I'm comfortable with, that I really love, I can sing until the cows come home. And it's like the most beautiful experience to let it come through my heart space that, it's like channeling these feelings. So it's just a reaffirming. And now it's kind of like these connections are connecting based on what we learned here today, that I'm definitely going to get like more into this and more into the reading as well, because I can already see the potential of little things I've intuitively done in my life, but how this ripple effect, even just what we shortly said on the business thing today, I'm like, I'm sold, y'all. I'm sold.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the channeling piece about the open throat, because and this is like anecdotal. I mean, I'm not like scientifically tracking this, but I know several, either they're like intuitive psychic medium types and they can and they have open throats and they're channeling a lot of different entities, or musicians. Like I just in the last couple of weeks met he's like a native flute player, and he was telling me that he didn't become a musician until, I don't know, like late 20s, early 30s. And he was saying he got through his dreams visions of like actually making his own flutes and playing. So he's not like, I don't know, classically trained, if that's the right term, and when he plays, he'll just get up and he'll just channel, right? And he's had different indigenous elders tell him or ask him how did you learn that? Because those are the songs of our people. And he's like, I don't know. I was just making it up, So that's the power of we can all channel, we're all sensitive, etc. But that's like, there's something special about the undefined or / open throat.
All right. I'm going to dive into that. I know I've always
so the singing,
singing. Yeah. And the channeling too. I've been really, when I first got into all this stuff years ago, I was like, oh my God, like if that would happen to, when I first started listening to Abraham, like 10, 15 years ago, I read the books, I loved them. I turned on like an audio CD recording of the book, because that's when we still had CDs. And I freaked out. It was a really old Abraham. And I feel like over time they sound less robotic or less alien, if you will. But it really scared me, like hearing that. And now it's kind of interesting tuning into that more. But I'm super interested in like, now if I'm like in a meditation, I'm like, come through me, anything,
Yeah.
So, not to get too woo, but yeah, the singing thing does make sense. And that's one of my like, not goals, but things like I push myself. I call it my risk list to kind of like, not get outside my comfort zone, is to take singing lessons and sing more this next year. So that is perfect.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, you set the intention here on the podcast.
I did. Everybody heard me. But thank you so much, Victoria, for coming on the show. It was so awesome learning about human design and selfishly learning more about myself. So thank you for sharing that with us today. And we close out every single show in the same way. How may we, the listeners, as an act of gratitude, be of service for you in return today, Victoria?
Thank you for the question. That's such a beautiful one. So I really see one of the huge, like, why did human design come down now? Why is it getting so popular now? And I know, you've got some woo listeners, right? So it's like we all know about like Age of Aquarius. Within human design, there's a similar belief set in that we're switching from one age to another in 2027. And I say this as context because I really think we're shifting into this time of we need to rely and tune into our own intuition more and more to know how to proceed in a world that's increasingly polarized. And, who do we listen to? Who's right? Like all of that. And, that's not really what I like to spend my time talking about. But what it does lead back to is how do we trust ourselves, right? And so whether that's human design or something else, I think my ask is for each person to consider like please don't force yourself to have an answer to this immediately, but just even allowing yourself and practicing sitting with the question of what is my truth? And whatever like feeling or color or frequency emerges, like just even the slightest like degree more that you can integrate that into your life, I think that'll change the planet.
No, for sure. And it doesn't have to be huge, like you said, little shifts that truly ripple energetically, but just, when you change something in your life, people around you notice. And they want what you're having. So be the inspiration. My motto is if you want to change the world, change yourself first, tune into your truth. And that's really what it is. Tune into your truth. So thank you so much, Victoria, for coming on. I had a wonderful time chatting human design today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
And remember, open up, surrender, trust, and let your body lead the way.